Hello, I'm Louis. Welcome to the second candidate spotlight we're putting on here at the SU. These are our candidates. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Leo and I'm a third-year zoology student.
I am Atika and I'm currently pursuing my master's in Operations, Logistics and Supply Chain Management.
Excelente, we're all introduced. Now for our first question. We at the SU have been extremely concerned about the cost of living crisis over the past few years. What do you guys plan on doing about it? Would you like to answer first?
I believe financial constraint is something students are dealing with, and it is extensive because somewhere down the line when you are looking for part-time job opportunities as well, I believe we face so much of difficulty because they're not flexible enough with our classes as well, and most of the time students are prioritizing the classes not that much because their part-time are because they are very much into their part-time job opportunities, and then they're not able to take their classes as well. So I believe if we are able to create more and more job opportunities within the university, it would be much more easier for them because you can provide that much flexibility that they are able to attend their classes as well, because at the end of the day we need to realize this thing that we are here for our studies more.
That's sad. Yeah, I've been looking for a job for a year and a half. That would
Even
really help.
I'm looking for a part-time.
What do you think?
Yeah, so I agree it's really important to open up those part-time opportunities around university. But I think it's also important to recognize that sort of part-time work isn't sort of the answer to everything. For a lot of students with heavy course loads, with disabilities, with caring responsibilities, it might not always be possible to work a lot of part-time hours alongside your studies. There's a lot of funding that's currently available through the participation bursary, Inclusive Newcastle, and I think it's important to expand on that and make sure that there's funding going towards that. I know it's a bit tricky with things like the participation bursary right now, because the way the funding works, it comes from the Access and Participation Plan, which means it's only open to home undergraduate students, which it turns into a whole mess. But aside from opening up those sort of hardship funds, bursaries, and making sure that there's enough funding going towards it, I think it's also important for the SU to be offering sort of practical advice and support, like everything we've got going on right now with the student pantry, opening up partnerships with other organizations to expand the options available there, to increase the funding allocated to it, as well as continuing schemes like £1 meals. Because I know one of the issues with that right now is that it's available in a lot of places, but with very limited availability. So perhaps sort of expanding how many £1 meals we have available to offer to students.
Any thoughts?
I just feel like as international students, we are already very much constrained with the financial aspect. So even if we are, including the £1 meals and everything like that, this is kind of a perspective which we, international students have, that we need to do a part-time, we need to, work, because the living expense is quite high. So at the end of the day, somewhere down the line, we're not prioritizing our masters. As research students, it is very important for us to attend the classes and do our researches. But in fact, I would say, we are more towards looking for good job opportunities, but we're not getting that much. And I think £1 meal and whatever you do, at the end of the day, you need a job. So if we are able to create more and more job opportunities within the university during our tenure or during our research period, it would be more flexible for us.
Yeah, and that's something I completely agree with. I'm an international student myself, and I also find myself working a lot of hours. So yeah, it's definitely important to be developing and expanding the opportunities, but I think it's equally important to realize that we also need to have other options available for students so that they're not sort of channeling all of their available hours into part-time work.
Cracking. Now for our next question. What do you, we were meant to cut off the next part, so you can disregard that. But what will you do for students with disabilities?
Are you looking? Yeah, sorry, no, I just wasn't sure who you wanted to talk first. So this is something I'm really passionate about. I'm the current disability officer. I myself have fluctuating disabilities, so my needs also vary greatly day to day. There's quite a bit of stuff I've done this year surrounding sort of writing a disability policy for the SU, working with student health and well-being to improve sort of disability support for international students and undiagnosed students, sort of advising the access and participation plan on creating more support for disabled students, but I think there's still a long, long way to go, and that's not just the case at Newcastle, it's the case at universities all across the country and really everywhere. One thing that I'd like to emphasize is raising awareness surrounding disability and sort of fluctuating disabilities. Because I think it's like a lot of people, when they think of disability, they've got a very static image in their head, like wheelchair users who are paralyzed, who can't walk at all, or autistic people who have identical support needs day to day. And I think we need to raise awareness around the fact that this isn't the case. Like, you see a wheelchair user walking the next day, it's not because they don't need their chair, it's because their needs fluctuate. As well as sort of like what you can do in your day-to-day life, what academics can do, what staff can do, what volunteers can do to make the world more accessible for disabled students. One way I would love to do this would be by mandating EDI training for NUSU volunteers and staff, as well as pressuring the university to make this training available and mandatory for academic staff as well. It's something I've been trying to work on this year, but as a voluntary officer, I haven't had the amount of time I would have liked to be able to dedicate to it, so it's definitely something I'd like to focus on next year.
Thank you for your answer. Any comment from you?
I think you already covered a lot. But yeah, we need to create more awareness about these topics, because I think we are lacking somewhere down the line, because I just believe, creating awareness will make us feel more empathetic. We don't need a sympathy, we just need empathy and more, learnings and creativeness towards disability as well. So yeah.
I think something else that I've really wanted to do this year, but I haven't had the capacity for as a voluntary officer, is sort of developing communications and posters surrounding disability to put up around the SU, to put up around the university. And that would be something I'd love to expand on and sort of get rolling if I become elected into the president role next year.
Yeah, exactly. Like I have not seen a lot of activities happening, within the events which are organized by the student union as well. And if we are able to, create a lot of awareness through activities and fun events, then it would be great.
That would be very nice. So how will you support and advocate for student welfare during your time as president?
Okay, so student welfare. I think student welfare is somewhere down the line in, inclusivity and diversity are two very important aspects of student welfare as well, because, we are all coming from different cultural backgrounds, and to break that barrier within, ourselves and also the community, and being inclusive towards each other is very important. At the end of the day, when we talk about welfare, we are also talking about the mental health. We are talking about breaking barriers. We are talking about communicating with others. But we can see it very, evidently in our classes as well. Like, there are groups already formed. Everyone, coming from same cultural backgrounds, they are sitting together, gossiping together, and they're not, able to communicate with others in the class. So it is very important for us to understand that we are here to work together, and we need to form a community with unity. So yeah, I mean, I would focus a lot on inclusivity and diversity throughout my tenure.
Thank you for your answer. What do you reckon?
So I think there's sort of two parts to this. I think there's establishing and improving the welfare resources we already have available and what could be made better. And there's also the aspect to sort of addressing the root causes of welfare issues. So the first part, I feel like that would be things like improving the provisions available at student well-being, taking a look at what resources we've got available within the Students' Union for supporting student welfare. I know a lot of students have had issues with student well-being throughout their time, whether that's incredibly long therapy waiting lists or not even being able to get into therapy with student well-being, or not getting the disability support they need. And I think that's something we definitely need to take a look at. We need to sort of pick apart like where the flaws are, what we can do to improve that, where we need more resources, where sort of the gaps in the system are. So that would be one example of sort of taking a look at welfare resources. And then the other issue would be addressing the root cause of a lot of these welfare concerns. And this is where it gets a bit more tricky because these do vary from student to student. Like for one student, the biggest thing affecting their mental health might be a lack of suitable housing, in which case we need to work with MPs, we need to work with the city council to take a look at sort of like what housing is available, what we can do to improve it, what we need to be talking about with landlords. Another example might be the cost of living crisis, and we've talked a bit about how to improve welfare there. I also realize that there's a lot of gaps in the moment in sort of the survivor support system. It Happens Here wrote a great report on that. I think it was last year or the year before. And it's sort of like looking at what information people have already collected and where there are sort of those gaps to work out sort of like the next steps we need to take.
Any comment?
I just wanted to add on safety issues as well, because as I'm heading as the student chair for business school, I've actually, a lot of students come to me and they complain about the trash happening, in the streets. So that is also something, which is related to the mental health as well, because a lot of students are complaining about, random people shouting at them, and then, so that is actually somewhere down the line affecting their mental health as well. So I believe, if we have like a direct support system from the university through helpline numbers, it would be great.
Ooh, also, going off that bit about welfare, that helpline thing reminded me. Nightline is a great resource. I think we need to put more resources into supporting Nightline volunteers as well, because I know they've had issues with trying to access support for their volunteers, and I would hate to imagine sort of like what pressures they'd be put under supporting the rest of the student body. So more support for Nightline, that's also something I think would be quite important.
Excellent. So next question. What do you think that you've got that would make you a good fit for this role?
So I've been really, really involved in the Students' Union over the last year. I've done a lot of work so far as disability officer. Written a policy. I've sort of run an awareness training workshop. I've sat in a lot of meetings in sort of SU working groups as well as university meetings, sort of pushing for. A lot of the stuff has been surrounding access and inclusion because that's what my role entails, but also surrounding sort of like financial help, financial support. I've worked a lot with societies and clubs. I'm a very active member of some societies and clubs, and I've been on their committees. So I know sort of like what issues and pitfalls and barriers they've run into. And I've also sat on the other side of that, on the Society's Executive Committee, sort of taking a look at complaints, working with special grants, initial grants, constitutional changes. There was something else, what was it? Oh, I've also been quite involved in student media over the last few years. I was head of tech for NSR last year. And I've done some writing for the Career and everything as well. So I would say my main strengths are that I've sort of dipped into pretty much everything at the SU and at the university. I've gained those experiences. I've heard what people are having issues with. I've seen where improvements are needed. I've seen sort of what people want. And I feel like that would make me a very strong candidate.
Thank you for your answer. How about you?
Yeah, like back in India, I was involved very actively, in Teach India program, which is a program initiated by Times of India. So we were actually voluntarily teaching to underprivileged students, and I believe, I was also a part of the Rotary Club of India, which was actually working towards thalassemia awareness camps, and I was brand ambassador for that. So I have that social, understanding of how to connect with people. Plus, you need to be an extremely good listener, and you need to have those leadership skills. So I do believe I'm a good, candidate for this position.
Thank you for your answer. Now, how do you plan on addressing and resolving academic barriers for students? For you?
Yeah, like academic barriers. Can you just, expand further?
So it could all just academic barriers. It could be anything from, I suppose, like the SSP system, like PECs, etc. It could be like the self-certification system. That's like it's disparate for different courses, stuff like that.
Like what I can understand, through academic barriers is that, a lot of students are facing a lot of problems writing their research papers, because I think every, university have their own perspective of how to write a research paper. Specifically, as you are an international student, it becomes like difficult for you to understand how to write a research paper, how to structure that paper. And then we have, resources, we have people, who can help us out, but somewhere down the line, we are still lacking a lot, because I've seen a lot of people still struggling with their research papers. They are still struggling, in attending the classes and understanding what is being taught to them towards, the research papers. So I think, we need to create more awareness, and we need to have more and more sessions on this particular thing as master students. Other than that, I don't think.
There is like the AI issue. It's been affecting my course recently,
Oh yeah,
actually.
AI issue is something, which is very extensive. I think everyone sort of use AI, but no one knows how to actually use it. Because you need to write your, research on your own. But okay, we use AI, but then how do you actually use it? You are not, told about this in your sessions. So it's very important to understand that AI is just a part of your research. It is not, your research. It is not, the kind of paper you need to write is not completely dependent on AI. So you need to be, more focused towards your own understanding of your research.
Thank you. So Leo, what do you reckon about the academic barriers?
So I feel like, again, this is one of those questions where there's a lot of aspects to it, really. But access to higher education is something I care deeply about. It's something I've been involved in a lot of work in this year and throughout my entire degree. So I'm very much aware that these academic barriers are going to look very different depending on who you speak to. For one person, it might be finances. For another, it might be the sort of their understanding their lecturer has of their needs. It might be the structure of their course. So I think like understanding those sort of nuances are quite important. Aside from that, I think you mentioned something about PECs. I've actually got a meeting in a couple of weeks with it's some university person whose name has completely escaped my mind, but I've got a meeting with them discussing sort of how the PEC system can be improved, and I think it's sort of like they're asking how can we reduce PECs. I don't think that's the question we should be asking.
They've got me a couple of times on the self-serve thing. It's a bit whack, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think that's the question we should be asking, not how do we reduce students submitting PECs. It should be how do we create a learning environment so that students are less affected by these things. How do we create a learning environment so that students feel safe enough to ask for help and support? This is such a general question. What other barriers are coming to mind? We've talked about sort of financial barriers surrounding cost of living. We've talked about disability. We've talked about general EDI awareness.
I think we could expand a bit on the AI issue because it's already affected my study of
what
politics.
degree? Politics, yeah.
Because they've been just like changing us over to exams rather than coursework because they're scared of AI, writing essays and stuff. They're dealing with it in Strange way to
Yeah,
go.
which I personally think is such a strange way to go about it because, like, your employers in the future aren't going to deal with AI becoming a thing by making you sit exams. They're just going to ask you to get on with your work. So I think it's like, yeah, I don't know. Personally, the most useful advice I've ever had when it comes to AI is my own lecturers sort of discussing like how they use it to support them rather than replace their work. And I think like sort of switching over to exams entirely from coursework because of AI is definitely not the solution because we've moved from exams to coursework for a reason. We know that coursework is more accessible, it's less stressful for a lot of students. And I think it's sort of like, that's something that academics need to have a think about as well, I suppose, sort of like, how do you structure your coursework so that it reflects your students' work, rather than just sort of like sprouting out facts that you just get through AI, I suppose. It really does depend degree to degree.
Yeah, I get you there. Anything to add?
I think students are also facing language barriers as well because a lot of students are not able to understand what is being taught to them in the classes. Specifically, I would say Chinese students, because they feel it very difficult when they are in their lectures. They're not able to understand everything, and when they are translating also, the translation is not quite that good. Even if you will see the recorded sessions and on the subtitles are also, they are like a mess. You will not be able to understand the subtitles as well because what has been taught to you in the class and what the subtitles are telling you are like completely two different things. So we need to work on this as well.
I think like addressing recaps definitely quite important, and I know that's something that we've been trying to work on for a while. I feel like it's a thing that comes up year after year. Last year there was a council motion submitted actually to make sort of student captioners a jobs on campus role. And I think like chasing that up, seeing what's happened to it, making sure it actually sort of like gets going would be quite a helpful thing surrounding sort of like those recaps and everything. I'm also remembering you mentioned SSPs earlier. Yeah, I think we do need to take a look at making sure that SSPs are acknowledged, importantly, because I think it's like a lot of us here will have an SSP and have never had a lecturer read it. So I think taking a look at how to make those adjustments sort of better known to lecturers, because I am very much aware that like they don't have a lot of time. It's not necessarily feasible for them to read 50 different documents for a single lecture they're doing, but finding a way to sort of like compile everything in the general points they need to know in that SSP that's relevant to them, as well as making sure that the SSP process is accessible and suitable, because that's also been an issue in the past.
Thank you for the answers, guys. That's next. Sustainability is very important here in Newcastle. How would you guys go about making sure that we develop sustainably on campus?
So this was a point in my manifesto. I'm a zoology student. I care about the environment. This is something that's important to me. I think sort of one thing we can look at is our food, what we're consuming. I think it's important to have a diverse range of plant-based options available. And besides that, I think it's also important to make sure that our supply chains, our food chains that we're using are as sustainable as possible. Where we can, cooking with sort of like cooking on campus, I mean, with catering and everything, with sort of locally sourced and sustainable ingredients and such. I think reducing waste is also something we can look at, whether that's through a sort of swap and share system between societies and volunteer groups, because it might be that like, okay, this one society's got a tripod they no longer need. Do they throw it out? No, because there's another society who might need that. As well as just sort of reviewing sort of NUSU operations and university operations to make sure that we're reducing waste where we can. I think something else that would be important would be sort of expanding the role that, what's the word? That sort of student groups, volunteer groups, and representation roles have in sustainability, because we have an ethics and environment rep. I think there's work we could do to sort of expand the scope of that role, sort of better define what that role entails, what the responsibilities are, as well as something that I would really want, because I think is important, would be having a sustainability coordinator for the SU, the same way we have an access and inclusion coordinator, a democracy coordinator. And I understand it might be difficult to get funding from the university for that, because that's never easy. But I feel like having a sustainability coordinator around would really help sort of those processes, since at the moment within NUSU we don't really have a staff member responsible for sustainability specifically.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from there. What do you reckon on this?
But yeah, we can reduce, using plastic also. I feel plastic is also a part of sustainability. So we can reduce the use of plastic within our university. If we can start this initiative, students would be more aware about, sustainability aspects. And somewhere down the line, we can also create awareness through, including sustainability as part of our, research. So a lot of research should be done on these particular topics. We can include it in our syllabus, I would say.
Thank you. Any more comments on that? Or
Yeah, I just had a question on sort of including it into the syllabus. I can definitely see how you do that for a lot of degrees, like especially my degree, we've got a massive focus on ecology and conservation. But how would you suggest sort of integrating that into other syllabi, the plural form of syllabus? Into other syllabi? Is it syllabuses? How would you suggest incorporating that into
I think
degree
sustainability,
syllabuses?
is a part of my syllabus as well. Like supply chain and sustainability goes hand in hand. So I believe sustainability is not just restricted to a particular course. Every course has some aspects which relates to sustainability. If you talk about marketing, so marketing sustainability is also, an aspect which they can, work towards. So I think right now these subjects are not like compulsory subjects in our courses. So we have a choice to choose from, the options. But if they are compulsory and then you are researching a lot on these topics, then it would be like quite good. Because awareness is, you will spread awareness only when you are, aware about those things. So if we can include this in our classes, it would be great.
No, I think that's a great idea. And I'm asking this because I'm genuinely curious. I would love to see how it works out. How would you suggest incorporating it into degrees like history, English, where there isn't necessarily a strong practical aspect, for lack of a better word?
In history and English, you can... In history, if you, particularly, if I talk about history, you can go back to the history and see, how destruction happened and a lot of things that happened in the history. So we can correlate history with sustainability. Somewhere down the line, I'm not a history student, but I believe this is a very natural topic and a universal topic, I would say. Sustainability is something which is universal and it is now a concern for everyone. So including it, maybe, in some courses it is not compulsory for history and English, as you said, but I think that students are interested in these kind of topics. So even if it is not compulsory in certain subjects or certain courses, they are still able to understand the effect of sustainability.
Yeah, no, that does sound interesting. And another point I would say is that student groups do a lot of great work around issues like sustainability, sort of societies and volunteer groups, activist groups, and I think it's important to support and uplift those student movements as well, because they do a lot of work that we might not think of.
Yeah, again, a lot of activities are happening, but we are not aware about it. So awareness is something which is very important. So if we can spread more and more awareness about these activities happening within our university campus, then it would make a great change and a difference as well. Because the university is quite big and a lot of students are not aware about what is happening, how is it happening. So if we can spread more and more awareness about sustainability and the activities which are happening within the university, it would be great.
Yeah, no, that is quite important. I was talking to, I think it was Danya last semester, who was doing work on sort of how we can improve student representation. It's hard to get your foot in through the door, I suppose, with SU stuff was definitely something that came up a lot. And I think that's something that we do have to think about and work on, sort of making sure that the Students' Union represents everyone, not just a select group of students. And that doesn't just go for sustainability, that goes for everything.
I suppose so. Any questions from the audience?
Okay, so this is not extending the question about student welfare. the university is very quick, just only 3 days, 4 days, in their support. They send everyone the email, including non-Ukrainian. And from the SU is next month. Yeah. But for the Palestinian one, for example, it comes pretty late, I think 2 months. And yeah, and especially, for example, there are some incidents. So I remember last year, April, it just started the war in Sudan, and I know a handful of students with Sudanese heritage, but I don't think the university reached them out about asking them about what kind of support they can offer, and yeah, so the question is like what kind of commitment and what kind of support that you will offer once you get elected to support students affected with this kind of event, war, genocide, and making sure that not selective, no one left behind. Thank you.
Would you like to go for this question first?
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up because I think that is something that's incredibly important and it's something I've noticed as well. It's definitely not just an issue within Newcastle University and within NUSU. It's a pattern you can see reflected worldwide, which is unfortunate. And I know NUSU is often in a bit of a strange position where it's like, we can't say that the union takes any specific stance, but we still have to offer support to students. And I also realize that something that NUSU isn't the best at is sort of like being reactive and adaptive with our responses, whether that's having our well-being and welfare support reflect the current experiences students are having, or whether that's sort of timely responses to wars and genocides, and I think that is something we need to focus on. I think that these efforts do need to they have to be informed by student voices. It can't just be sort of like people sitting in a room in a working group who aren't personally affected by this going ahead and saying, okay, this is what we need to do, because that won't reflect sort of the needs of students. So I think that's something we definitely need to work with students with. We need to listen to what's wanted and what's needed. And aside from that, it's sort of, how do I put this? Aside from providing those welfare resources, I think it's also important that we hold the university accountable to sort of these wars and genocides, because I know there's been some controversy going on at the moment with sort of what the university has been doing surrounding Leonardo and supplying weapons to Israel. And that's something that we need to hold the university accountable for. So for me, offering support in those situations, it's a combination of being adaptive and responsive and really taking the time to listen to students and what it is they need, because it's like one working group might go ahead and say, okay, what we need a specialized PECS process for this. And the students might be thinking that's not what we need. What we need is a show of solidarity. What we need is a space to explore our grief, to share in our culture. And if that's what students need, then that has to be what we respond to and what we enact, as well as sort of like holding the university accountable when there's sort of complacency or involvement in these issues. I think, sorry, something I've just thought of, I'll make this quick because I know we're probably running low on time. Yeah, is again, uplifting student activism and student voices and offering sort of students like the support and advice and sort of backing that they need when they're sort of speaking out around these issues.
Thank you for your response. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think you covered everything.
Hit the nail on the head again. What have we got now? So, debate. So you guys are responsible for liaising with the university's shareholders. How will you make sure that you're advocating for student interests both within and outside of the uni? I'll let you go first.
We We are the student voices, so it's very important to first understand what students require. So if we are able to connect with the students and then understand what their requirements are, only then we'll be able to, communicate their things to the shareholders or the other people around us. So I believe, we need to first be very reactive towards the students, responsive towards them, and then we are, somewhere down the line, we'll be able to understand what the other shareholders want. So something, which is very important according to me is communication. So we need to break that communication barrier within, the university, within the students. Then only we'll be able to be reactive more towards this kind of an issue.
Yeah, I think those are really important points. And again, I think something that we as a university and union really need to work on is making sure that we're listening to all student voices. I know sort of like how the SU works, how council works, all of that can seem like really, really strange and confusing if you've never been involved in it before. So I think we do need to do work sort of surrounding demystifying almost things like your voice, campaigns, and making sure that all students can get involved in this so that when we're speaking to external stakeholders, when we're speaking to the university, we know that what we say is reflective of all students, not just of just of all students, essentially. I think something that the current SAB team's done quite well with is Feedback Fridays, sort of going out with that whiteboard, going out with a question, catching students as they pass by and saying, what do you think about this? What can we do about this? I think aside from sort of formal ways of gathering feedback, of gathering voices such as council, reports, motions. It's equally important to be listening sort of on the ground, I suppose, with that informal surveying, paying attention to what's going on sort of student society, social medias, student groups that are popping up around university, keeping an eye on what movements are going on, because it's like, the university might not necessarily hear and see those people and those voices, but we're in a position where we can, and we're in a position where we can take that to the university.
Yeah. Any comment on that? I suppose we're debating them.
Yeah. Yeah, we have similar stances on this, I feel, which does make it a bit of a strange debate.
Should we all just talk about what aspects we agree on? Yes.
Yeah, so I think something that the two of us very much agree on is making sure that sort of all students are aware of what the SU has to offer, making sure that all students are sort of able to access it, I suppose. Because it can be really hard to work out what's going on if you're not like already involved with it. So I suppose it's opening those doors to everyone and making sure that sort of like these processes and everything are well understood.
How would you go about making information about this, and I guess the avenues more open for uni students to engage with the kind of the machine?
I think something would be like reaching out to students directly, like things like the student summit, like student council and motions. I think it would be reaching out to societies, clubs, saying like, hey, is there anything you want to take? Is there an issue you feel strongly about that you want heard? And then offering that support to make sure that those voices are heard. Because like it does happen that like very good motion ideas come through and we just can't pass them because we're a charity, we have very specific rules surrounding what a motion has to look like. So I think like making that available for everyone, making sure people like if they want to have the option to learn more about it. I think sort of like putting this information on our social medias and everything is also quite important. Maybe having like a calendar of everything going on so you can look at that and work out sort of like, okay, this was something I care about, this is what I can do about it. Or maybe updating our campaigns pages or your voices pages so that it's easier for students to understand sort of like if they're having this issue or they have this idea, what can I do to make it heard at a higher level?
Do you have any comments on like how you'd go about this?
Yeah, I just believe, if we have those live feedback mechanism kind of a thing within our university, it would be great because we have those surveys happening through emails but I feel like a lot of students are still not, able to connect through those surveys. So if we have somewhere down the line live feedback events kind of a thing within our university, it would be great because then we'll be, directly interacting with the students and direct interaction is quite good.
Yeah, it does tend to lead to a bit more engagement. So,
We can keep talking in circles.
so how is everyone's day?
Yeah, it's been all right. I'm still thinking about the question. No, I'm just thinking about student representation. No, I am also just thinking about student representation in general and how that can be improved, but I feel like, yeah, that does get quite broad. I wonder if there are avenues for sort of better supporting our representatives, whether that's EDI reps, course reps, liberation officers, and making sure that they get the compensation that they deserve, because I've seen this a lot where it's sort of like a lot of our most valuable work is coming from these EDI reps, these course reps, these school reps, these liberation officers, and it's sort of like, I want to make sure that there's the support in place for those systems to succeed and for people to feel like they're being adequately recognized, adequately compensated for the work they're doing surrounding representation.
So this is the kind of stuff that you'd bring when you're liaising with the shareholders. How do you think you'd go about kind of getting it implemented? And if that question made sense at all.
It does, and what I do know about the university is that they like numbers, they like sort of structured reports, they like structured feedback. So I suppose it's also making sure that we have those available. So if we're talking to the university and they're like, okay, you're saying we need this, how do you know we need this? We can say, well, we've got a report that an intern or a student wrote, or we've got all of these survey results from a society survey, or we've got this motion from council with so-and-so votes approving it. So it's making sure that we get that informal feedback, but I think like the tricky thing as a SAB would be making sure that you're structuring the informal feedback and the conversations you're having in such a way that it's meaningful to the university when we're sort of holding these difficult conversations.
Well, unless we've got any more questions from the audience or anything, I guess we're all wrapped up then. Ooh.
Pratika, in your manifesto, you state you want the university to become more adaptive. How do you propose to do that?
Adaptability, when I talk about adaptive, I'm actually talking about how, you can be more communicative, how you can be more religious towards everyone and inclusive towards everyone. So my point by saying that adaptability, I actually wanted to relate it with inclusivity, diversity, breaking the cultural barrier, improving, improvement within the university through, creating more flexible job opportunities for the students. So yeah, like my point was like that.
Splendid. Unless there's any more questions, I think we're wrapped up. Thank you for listening, guys, and I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thanks for hosting.
Thank you guys for being here.